Thanks for joining us on Legacy Builders again. We have a very special guest today. Dad, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, this is a friend of the family, Carrie Morris, and we actually go to church together. And Carrie serves on the kids ministry. And when Madison and I were sitting there talking about parenting, we were like, we really got to see if Carrie would come on and just share his way. I mean, he's got a great family, great kids. I mean, I just watch how he interacts with the kids up in the children's ministry, and he's just passionate about that, as you guys will find out in this podcast. So, Carrie, thank you so much for coming on and taking time out to share with us some stuff on the topic of parenting. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my honor, my pleasure. And Madison's my boss in the kids department upstairs, so I like it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So she's a great leader up there, man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I just appreciate your passion for all the kids upstairs too. Just like, you come every Sunday so ready and so passionate about those kids. And I just love it. Yeah.
And she puts up with all my questions and everything. So.
No,
what about this?
So good. They keep me on my toes. They make us grow and be better. So it's so good.
That's great.
So I guess Carrie, start us off a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your family.
So Jill and I have been married 20 years. It was a second marriage for me, and we have an 11-year-old, 7-year-old, and 3-year-old who'll be 4 on Saturday. So that's why I'm hesitating. So 11, 7, and almost 4. And then I have a 29-year-old who's married and actually was here today. He works with me, and I get to see him on a daily basis. They don't have any kids yet. So I have all these kids, but no grandkids. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride. All 3 of our kids are products of IVF and vitro. So, there's a lot of people out there that deal with infertility, things like that. And I'm very intimately acquainted with that pathway, but we made it. It was a lot of prayer, and thank God that we have these little screamers running around here.
Yeah, well, and as you can see, I love your background. You're showing us that earlier before we started the broadcast. I mean, if you guys can't see, talk about Dad of the Year. Look at all these photos of the kids in the background up on the wall. But it just shows how much he just loves and cares about the kids. He just loves to have them in his office and, showing off all the kids. So, love
and you guys do too. We're cut from the same cloth, Eric, and it's, it's really a gift from God. And, so I'm 56, right? So I have a 3-year-old, I'm 56, and I never knew I'd be in this position, but I just call it my crazy life. And it's so amazing to get up every day and have that energy and in the house and just watch them, and, I'm sure as we talk today, we'll get into some, it also comes with a lot of challenges as well.
Right.
I always say, and especially as I got, involved in more parenting type stuff, I always say that the reason I'm qualified to talk about parenting is because I've pretty much made every mistake you can make as a parent, so parenting is hard, man. It's a challenge and rewarding, but anything worth doing is.
Right. And that's why I wanted to, kind of bring you on, and thanks for bringing that up. I was just going to mention that as we do the session in this podcast, we're not coming to our viewers, and we're not trying to say we've got our act together. We know everything and we're perfect. No, quite the opposite. We've gone through, we've got the battle scars, and we just want to share with some people some of the struggles, the victories, some of the things that we've learned. And, and in this case, we want to hear, we bring Carrie on to share from another perspective as to some of the things that he's learned and where he's learned them from. And so it can help whoever's watching be a better parent, just be more prepared for those who are thinking about being parents. And
it's just such a dynamic thing, and it's ever changing, and and everybody's situation is different, like how their kids are spread out, how many kids they have. Just going from 2 to 3 was a big deal, like not only are we outnumbered, but just those additional personalities. And poor Tyler, the 11-year-old, he had mom and dad all to himself, for like 4 years before Caitlin ever come. And then Caitlin turns out she's like this tornado, and so all of a sudden his world was rocked in a good way and a challenging way. But one thing I want to make sure we talk about today that just made me think of is the gifts. You know, we talk about the scripture sometimes, the gifts and callings of God without repentance. And that's the thing that I know you and I both enjoy watching, is just there are different gifts. But one thing that I know for sure is that there's two sides to every gift, you know? So if a child, I'll just take Caitlin, for example, her gift is, I mean, she's just a powerhouse. She's strong. I mean, that's why she's a competitive gymnast. Like, she was a state champion this last season in her division.
Awesome.
And I mean, Madison, she's seen her a little, but see, Madison sees the other side of Caitlin a lot.
Oh, okay.
You see like the nurturing side. So part of her gifting is very nurturing, but there's another part of her that the way she's wired, it's going to be incredible to see what she does, because if there's something she sets her mind on, I mean, she's not going to go around it, or she's going to go through it, you know, that kind of thing. And so the other side of that gift, and so it's that molding process. And what I tell the kids is, I say, Caitlin, you know, God gave you this gift. So when that gift is causing her problems, where she's maybe bullying her older brother, or she's just maybe not telling the truth in a moment because she's determined to make something happen and she wants to control the situation, I say, you know, God gave you this gift in order to be able to accomplish what he's called you to do. But there's this side of it, babe, that keeps getting you in trouble, that we have to mold, and you have to learn to guide. And, you know, so, yeah, anyways, I could go on all day about that, but there's that two sides to those gifts. That's what we enjoy and we struggle with, Eric. What do you think?
No, that's really though great. Like, I mean, let's start there. That was one of our questions, is how do parents like find those things and help walk through the struggles and the maybe not weaknesses, but I liked what you called them, the other side of the gift. And so how do parents like recognize those things?
Well, I think the easiest way, Madison, is just when we find ourselves like getting onto a child, or a child starts getting in trouble for the same thing all the time, that's the other side of it. Because if it's very common to them, you know, it's like that one thing that they always do wrong, or those two or three. What I think I did just by default is I started noticing that category. Like and with her, I get this really good contrast, because I see she already trains 11 hours a week in the gym. So she loves gymnastics. She's very determined. So in gymnastics, you go from skill to skill to skill, right? So you're learning skills on the bars, you're learning skills on the beam, vault, and floor. And so to be in the regular USGSA, like it's an invite only team situation, it's very controlled. And so to get from one skill to the other, a young lady like that has to have incredible determination. So I think with her, I get to see that determination there. And then I recognize that same determination when she's just getting in trouble, like doing such wrong things sometimes, like before she even realized. And then when she settles down, you know, and she's had to think about it. And we'll talk about some of those techniques maybe in a little bit that I learned from this National Center for Biblical Parenting. I see when she calms down and she comes off the situation, you know, then I see that part of her that you always see, Madison. You know, she doesn't want to be mean to her brother. You know, that's not her heart. She doesn't want, it's just, she's trying to learn how to handle that big tiger inside of her, you know, and that's not an excuse. And it doesn't excuse the behavior, and it certainly doesn't get her out of any consequences.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's how you recognize it. And then I'll just go on to say, Madison, that so like Tyler is completely different. You know, he's mild-mannered, soft-hearted. I mean, even today we were driving down the street and he was in jujitsu some before COVID hit. And I mainly had him there because I wanted him to be able to defend himself, because he is this like kind-hearted, soft, mild-mannered person, you know, and not into sports. I mean, when what's the author of the birth order book? I know you, Kevin Leman. So in Kevin Leman's birth order book, are you familiar with that? Yeah. You guys got to You got to check that out.
Okay.
So the birth order book is kind of like, I think it's the gold standard on parents understanding. And this really comes back to your question, Madison. Parents understanding kind of that overall framework of their child, because it's very common for the second born to kind of cleave off the firstborn and really be opposite. I mean, we've all kind of seen that in life, right? And then the third born's a toss up, right? Maybe a combination. But anyways, Tyler and Caitlin totally did that in extreme ways. They're both at really, and so Tyler's over here. The other side of his gift, Madison, is not having that fire sometimes, not having that get up and go, not having, like just being so content and satisfied. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy adventure every day, right?
Well, so you had talked about, and we want to talk about this a little bit more. Parents, they want to learn stuff. There's some parents like me. Before I had kids, I was a studier. I wanted to learn as much as I could, be as prepared as I could. And I had books and stuff that I read. And there's other parents who maybe later in life they finally, that maybe they weren't ready to have kids, but ready or not, here they are. And then later on, they're like, okay, I've got to learn some stuff. And so there's some tools or organization that you've come across, Carrie, that has helped you learn stuff and provide some of these resources. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the backstory is Jill and I had studied a lot. We're that kind of people too, and especially we had 4 years. It took us 4 years to get Tyler. 2 years trying all kind of stuff before IVF, and then in vitro fertilization, in case somebody doesn't know what IVF stands for. And then it took us 2 more years with 4 IVF cycles. So like Jill had to take, over the course of all that, 234 injections. And, one time she found out it didn't happen was on Mother's Day. And it was just like, a crushing thing. So especially I think when you go through so much, or whether you do or don't go through so much, everybody listening to this, if they have children, I believe they want the best for their child. So we were studying and looking at these different courses. Positive Parenting Solutions, I remember, was one of them, and different ones. And it reminded me of when I was getting kind of a minor in psychology in college years ago, where I had all these classes, and you would see, and I would just about halfway through undergrad is when I really I had an experience where I went from just knowing Jesus as Savior, which I had since 11, just this clear revelation. Madison's heard my testimony a little bit in passing.
You just shared it with the kids on Easter. It was so good.
Yeah. And so, but it wasn't until I was halfway through college that God set me up, put some things in my life. I was kind of a bottom up looking time. And that's when, boom, everything changed 180. So my point is, I was deep in the Word. I was just devouring the Word constantly during this time period I'm about to talk about. So then I'm getting this minor in psychology. And what I found was, in all these different psychological frameworks that therapists use, it's usually built on one nugget of truth. So like this whole framework they'll use is usually built on a nugget of truth that you and I would probably find in the Bible. And I remember this one class I had, it was like a survey of counseling, and we had to write all these reaction papers, and I kind of would get in trouble sometimes with some of the things I would write. But that's what I found, is this one had a nugget, this one had a nugget, and this one had a nugget, but that's not how we can really fulfill what God's called us to do, is just with these little nuggets, right? And so it's all in the Word together. So that's what I kind of noticed a little bit in a lot of these parenting classes, is that this one had a nugget and this one had a nugget. But we were at a National Homeschoolers Conference here in Nashville, and we were walking along, and I came up to this booth, and it said, I get choked up. It just had the title there, the National Center for Biblical Parenting. And the reason why I get choked up, I think, is because as I got to know the founders and then spent time with them when I went to a presenter's training and that kind of thing, and really when I just first read their books and started watching their materials, which the first one I read was this one. It's called Parenting as Heart Work, HEART. I I just told Jill, I said, listen, nothing's perfect out there this side of heaven, but man, this is what we've been looking for. Like, this is what I've been looking for, because it was all built around, number one, the word. And anybody can go through and write a bunch of stuff about parenting out of the Bible, right? But what Scott and Joanne had done is literally, number one, he's a PhD practicing doctor, works with kids constantly. She was a pediatric nurse. So they've got like this field experience, but they literally, like for this book, for example, took all the scriptures. There was over 700 scriptures about honor and family and children, and they had them all laid out on the table, and they found that it actually ended up, they could divide all those 700 and something scriptures into like 9 different areas. And so that's why it's called Parenting as Heart Work, is because their focus is on actually changing the child's heart and training the child's heart. And everything kind of has a relation to like adulthood. So right back to what you said earlier, Eric, that you're like, hey, I learned these things and I want to pass them on to my kids. That's one of the purposes even of the podcast. That's the thing is you wanted them to, you said it yourself a few minutes ago, you wanted them to try to learn from your mistakes earlier so they didn't have to make those same mistakes. And so what the National Center for Biblical Parenting does is it has all these materials to help us train the child's heart. So I know I'm kind of jumping in a couple different areas there, but we can unpack it as you'd like.
Very nice. Show us, you're showing us even more materials that they have. Show us all those materials that they have.
Yeah, so this is so that's Parenting as Heart Work. Here's say goodbye to whining, complaining, and bad attitudes in your kids and you and your kids. Mm-hmm. So that's another, you kind of see that's pretty Warren right there, right? Here's another one, Good and Angry, exchanging frustration and character in you and your kids, so it's called Good and Angry. Because Jesus said, be angry, but sin not, right? So that's what I mean. Like, you just have to kind of go and hit the website and just start experiencing some of these things. I mean, they've got so many courses here. Like this one's called Motivate Your Child, a Christian Parent's Guide to Raising Kids Who Do What They Need to Do Without Being Told. The Christian Parenting Handbook, 50 heart-based strategies for all stages of your child's life. So that comes with like a big handbook.
So Carrie, are they able to find all this like on the website too? Or
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All the books.
It goes on. There's just all kind of, so there's like workbooks to work through and courses for the kids. But a central theme to everything that Scott and Joanne do is honor. It's really all rooted in honor, Ephesians 6:2-3, right? So children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your mother and father, for this is the first commandment with a promise, and so that you'll have a long life and it'll go well. And actually, Pastor Joel quoted that Sunday morning.
Did he?
He talked about that Sunday morning. Yeah. So it's just unending. And then there's even, you're talking about a quick guide. So this says biblical parenting at your fingertips. You literally can go in here and it's like a cheat sheet. So in this first section, it says what I'd like to change about my parenting. And then these are all listed. You find the one that matches. Then it says parenting strategy and explanation, scriptures to consider, and where to learn more. It reminds me when I was first learning and reading the Bible, I went to the back all the time and said, okay, I need to learn about this. You go into the back of the book, right?
Yeah.
Bible, and then it would show you where to go. And so that's that section. And then I think it changes. Yeah. And then this section is the problem I'm seeing in my child that I'd like to work on. And it says, so here's the challenge, the hard issue explained or parenting principle that applies, meeting with your child, scriptures to consider, and where to learn more within all these resources.
Wow.
So it's like a quick guide. Yeah. And so the one book, Say Goodbye to Whining and Complaining, that's actually on Audible. So it's like their first book they've got on Audible.
Oh, cool.
I'm a big Audible fan. But yeah, I wanted to read you. I might need a second to find it. So I just started wearing contacts a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still trying to get used to it.
Oh, okay.
So if you
While you're finding that, I got
Yeah.
so for some of the viewers who maybe aren't Christian viewers, and we're talking about parenting. Well, you had made comment that even in secular counseling, there's these nuggets that you could see in biblical things. So how would you encourage people who like may not view the Bible like we do to still consider these materials that would benefit them, even though they're not, maybe don't believe in the Bible at this point in their life, but they're just still searching for parenting answers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because I would just tell you the materials that Scott and Joanne have created, none of them depend on you being a Christian. First of all, these principles that they've brought out of the Bible apply and work for anybody, whether you're a Christian or not. So I'll give you an example. It's called the instruction routine. So like in the instruction routine, there's a role for the parents and a role for the child. And so the child's job, like in step 1, is come when called. So even little children, you start to teach them come when called. And so they learn. And what the process does is it puts the onus on the child. The whole idea is it starts to help them feel responsible for their own actions. So, and I won't take all the time to unpack all that right now, but like, for example, that instruction routine, it's a good instruction routine. Like you come when called, you send the child on as if they're on a mission. Their job is to go to complete that mission. I'll just give you the high point, and then they report back, because children learn to expect by what you inspect, and they report back, and then you go and inspect it, and then you release them. And that's just kind of the short of it. It's very clearly 5 steps, but none of that depends on you being a believer. None of that depends on you knowing Christ or how you feel about it. So they're just very sound. I mean, the stories I've heard from what Dr. Scott Taransky, the stories he's told and things he's seen turn around children with attention defiance disorder and just every disorder you can imagine, he's got a story for it where he took these same principles and it completely turned it around, so.
Thanks for sharing that. Because a lot of people get hung up, just at the National Center of Biblical Parenting.
That's
okay,
true,
guys,
yeah.
don't get hung up on the biblical part of it. There's concepts, there's psychology, there's years of child experiences that these people are sharing with us. So if you're getting hung up on that, I think you're missing the whole point. And there's value in some of this material if you're looking for it.
I think it's close to 20 years.
Yeah.
What it was is their 2 families, they lived actually geographically close, and they went to the same church years ago. This is, and as they got to know one another, and the families actually vacationed together, they were just all good friends. And so when Scott started wanting to do more of a public thing for the public and started creating materials, it was just, she was a pediatric nurse. And so it was just a natural fit, like that's what they just started working together.
Go for it.
Yeah. So you had mentioned you found some principles or something in the book, like some 9 principles in one of the books that you kind of something that you've learned and have really gotten out of this. Is that something you can share with us?
Yeah, thank you. I never finished that story. So they had those 700 and something scriptures laid out there that they went and found. And the central theme of every scripture, it had to mention the heart. So it was all based around the heart. And that's what this book is. Parenting is heart work. It's also hard work, right? But so here's those 9 things. So the heart is a wrestling place. The heart is a wrestling place. Number 2, the heart is the place of commitments and determination. So, very important thing for children to learn, right? Number 3, the heart is where we feel close to others. Number 4, the heart is where we experience emotions. Number 5, the heart is where temptations and desires develop. This is making me want to go back and read this again.
Yeah.
Number 6, the heart experiences guilt and conviction of sin. Number 7, the heart experiences passion. Number 8, the heart chooses values to hold and convictions to live by. So like the little antidote here is responsibility in part is staying true to personal values even when no one is watching. Number 9, the heart is where we connect with God. So that's the last one. So literally those 700 plus scriptures, I mean, this is like true story. Like they literally put them all out on pieces of paper. They're on the table and they found that they all fit into one of these 9 categories. And so, yeah, it just starts, I think the biggest thing is it starts giving you awareness instead of just focusing on a technique. And so having a toolbox for parenting is important, right? We all need a toolbox. We all need those little rudimentary things that we know it can be a good sound way to react to things. But this type materials, it really gets you down into thinking about your child's heart and how that everything we do is really training that heart, because it's out of that the issues of their life are going to come, right? So I love this stuff. I could talk about it all day.
So talk to us a little bit more about your journey. So you found the table, with this organization. And then did you just dive right into all of this like content, or what was the next kind of phase for you?
Yeah, I started reading the book and, it was just like fresh water, it was just fed me so much. And just obviously I began to try to apply everything. And so I did that for probably a year, just like the instruction routine. And another thing I can talk about, like instead of timeouts, we use a break, and I'm happy to talk about that. And then I got an email or something, it talked about the presenter training. And I thought, wow, as something I enjoy. I mean, I was used to public speaking and things in my work. And so that part didn't bother me, but just a chance to share this and empower other parents with the information. And we're and I think we all know we're just scratching the surface tonight. Like you're getting a few little anecdotes from me.
Right.
But there really is answers for every question. And I say that because it's not just the materials. So National Center for Biblical Parenting has just active coaching groups going on, parent coaches in training all the time. So he is multiplying all of that into live human beings who will get in the trenches with parents and help them get through all those things with their kids. There's like an online community as well where people can post questions and things. And so I went to the training and came back and did a seminar at our church. And, I'm running a business and having all these kids. I never did any other seminars after that, but it's still just sitting in me, waiting, kind of dormant, like I can't wait I feel like I definitely will do more, but it might be a webinars. And what I noticed, so I think that kind of answers your question, but another part of that journey, Madison, is I did a life group at the church at the time. And we did a life group and we went through, because there's life group materials, there's videos that can be shown one week after the next for life groups. And we did all that. And I saw what struggle it was for parents to even because I don't think we had childcare. It was like on a Wednesday night church, or was it just a life group time? We were at the church. I can't remember, but I just remember it being a struggle for like the night of the week and the childcare and things. So I'm really thinking that this would be more of like a Zoom type seminar or, a webinar type thing where people could just tune in like this, especially since, in 2020 put us all in virtual mode anyways.
Right.
So that was kind of the journey, Madison. And it's just kind of been sitting dormant in me as far as a teaching perspective since then.
And what are like some of the key or most valuable lessons you learned from this organization and program just in your own parenting?
Yeah. So number one, besides just increasing my awareness of constantly training their heart, I'm just real big around here on words and the kids, and, they know, certain words they just don't say. And like I said, I've got 3 kids that challenge all those boundaries constantly. And so one of the big takeaways is like doing a break. So let's say you do a great instructional routine, and I challenge you to go find that. You could easily find that online, or you can even go to YouTube and just search for some of this stuff on YouTube for the National Center for Biblical Parenting. I bet you can find the parenting routine right on there with Scott doing it, teaching it. But obviously they're still going to make mistakes, and they're going to do things wrong. So what a break is where you say, okay, I want you to, and you just do it. So let's talk about a timeout first. So a timeout, right, is, you hear the old thing. I mean, we used to watch Super Nanny. We used to watch all that stuff, man. We would glean little nuggets here and there, and we would try them and do them. And there's some great stuff out there. But the big difference between a timeout and a break is, one, there's not a certain time limit on a break. The child's going to decide when they come out of the break, if they've worked on their heart. Number 2 is, because, like with timeouts, it's like, okay, if they're 3 years old, you do 3 minutes and all that. Well, when I put a child in a break, I say, okay, Caitlin, I want you to sit right there. I want you to work on your heart. And she knows what that means, because, we've taught her what that means. You sit there and work on your heart. Now, when you've worked on your heart, I want you to come talk to me. You come let me know. So when she comes and lets me know, then I'm going to do what's called a positive conclusion. I'm going to ask her a few questions. I'm going to say, okay, what'd you do wrong? Okay. And that's kind of where you can tell if that bad attitude is still there and they're still huffing and puffing, then maybe she hasn't quite worked on her heart, right? Maybe she needs a little more time in the break, right? We're picking on Caitlin today. It's okay. She can handle it.
She can handle it. Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. Lord have mercy. And so say, what'd you do wrong? And they'll say, like my kids, they'll say, disobedience, or I was unkind, or, so that's our chance to see if they understand in their heart what they did wrong. It's also a chance to see what they believe. So Scott talks a lot about, what does a child believe? Because sometimes they innocently believe wrong things. They just do. And so anyways, what'd you do wrong? Okay, why is that wrong? Key question. Next question is, why is that wrong? Why is it wrong? Sorry, that's the disobedience, or, it's unkind, or I shouldn't do that, or I should be honest, and then the next one is, what are you going to do different next time? Okay. So you give them a chance to process that. Because if you think about it, isn't this what we do as adults, Eric? Like when we screw up, we think, hey, all right, what did I do wrong? Okay, I know that's wrong because da 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 da, and that's called conviction, right? And we would say that's conviction of the Holy Spirit a lot of times. And then as adults, we're like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I don't want to. I'm going to prepare different. I'm going to see that coming. So you ask them, what are you going to do different next time? And then just like Jesus did with the woman that was caught in adultery, the last thing we say to them is, all right, I want you to go do better now, go do. And so we end a positive conclusion. That's why it's called a positive conclusion, is we end it with that. And a lot of times you can include a hug or a prayer, that kind of thing. And so that's one of the examples of like a big takeaway that we use all the time. But I also notice, so I'll let you respond to that before I say the next thought.
No, go ahead. And your next thought.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So breaks but I've just seen that all work really, really well. It works so much better than a timeout, because they have to learn to work on their own heart. You see what I mean by, it's more of an adult skill, but we brought it down to that bite-sized chunk, and so now I've forgotten what I was going to say about the next thing. I completely lost it.
That's right. It'll come back to you.
Yeah, it will.
No, that's what's great. Because a lot of times, it's either a whooping or or a timeout. So to have this other concept of a break and to be able to learn about what that is, and again, the psychology behind it is brilliant.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you said that, because it reminds me to say it doesn't mean that there won't be consequences for the child, right? So put them in a break, they need to work on their heart. And sometimes whatever they did still comes with consequences, right? And that's one of the things that, like, Jill and I learned from one of the other courses, was just to think about things in terms of there's natural consequences, there's unnatural consequences. We try to make consequences relatable, right, to whatever they did. So we want the consequence to try to train their heart as well. So in some situations, it could be a spanking, right? They could get a spanking, especially Caitlin. But like Jill and
I hope she watches this when she's older.
Funny story, right? So we got a funny story is, so poor Austin, my 29-year-old. So the story there is, I married Austin's mom. This was 1990. She had 3 kids from a previous marriage. Okay. They were 5, 6, and 8. I was 24 years old. Right. So we got married, and all of a sudden I had this instant family, and these kids were 5, 6, and 8. Their dad was alive, but he was just absent, and so about 2 years later, when I was 26, I ended up adopting them, not knowing there would be a divorce in the future. But long story short, I was old school back then, right? I'm 24, 26. This is in the 90s. Like, I didn't know any different besides just, spank a child if they disobeyed, or if they talk back, or, like, once they cross a certain line, then they're going to get a spanking. Austin even had to go get his own switches, you guys. That's how old school I was, right? So I remember we kept them on top of the fridge, right? My point of telling that story is, and sharing that, is that by the time I married Jill, and it's not like she was like anti-spanking, but she's like, hey, I want to see if we can do this without even having to spank at all, that kind of thing. Well, that was easy with Tyler, right? I mean, we had this little mild-mannered boy who wanted to please. I mean, you could just, he was the kind of kid you could just threaten him with a spanking, Well, then Caitlin comes along, and I remember, like, all of a sudden, we're doing all these things we never planned on doing. So that's what I mean by parenting is a dynamic experience. It's never set it and forget it. It's never, oh, you got it all. Just like Eric and I were saying at the beginning of the podcast, like, hey, we're here talking about parenting, not because we know it all, just because we probably made all those mistakes, and hopefully we've learned something, right? And so all of a sudden that changed, and one little anecdote about Caitlin is, she's the kind, though, man, you can spank her, and like less than 10 minutes later, she's off playing again, I mean, you spank a child that's more wired differently, they might be crying for 2 hours, and oh yeah. So it's always evolving and everything. And so the point is that a spanking by itself, just that consequence without the heart work is just kind of very one-sided, right? It doesn't, and that's the thing. Now that bounces me over to being reactive as a parent, right? So it's so easy in the urgency and current of life that we're all going through to just be reactive as a parent. And sometimes you're so tired, and, you and me both, Eric, can testify that sometimes they act the worst when we're the tiredest, right?
Oh, right.
And so, if having these guidelines, or having this framework, to be able to get in us, and then even the children know the framework, and so what happens is that if sometimes, a lot of times, like with Kian, he's almost 4 years old. If you start saying, well, I think you need to be in a break, do you need to work on your heart? A lot of times that right there is enough that they'll say, no, I don't need to work on my heart. I'm sorry, or something like that. It just depends on the child. But one thing I wanted to mention is that even people like us who read all this stuff and all, sometimes life will take you to a place, like where you all of a sudden you realize, like, wow, I've been like shouting out instructions like I used to, instead of like using the instruction routine or something like that, So we all kind of like slip away and then have to refresh ourselves and slip away. You know, I see your heads shaking. You guys seem like you agree and understand that.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's ever done anything can understand that. You just slip away sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're like, you know, face palm, like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Why am I? Yeah. Cause yeah. So it's a beautiful experience that God has blessed us with, you know, and it is what it is. I think I was saying to Tyler the other day, I was like, Tyler, you know, Mom and I didn't sign up because he's very binary when it comes to if he gets in trouble or things get messed up during the morning, for example, he wants to get it done where he knows the rest of the day is going to be okay or good, you know, like, and of course, Jill and I don't want it to drag on either. And so I had to help him understand that, you know, we didn't sign up for this and have you to just be all about one day. You know, it's kind of like the old thing of, we're in this for the long haul, Tyler. You know, we love you. You know, there's nothing you can do to stop us from loving you. But, you know, we have an obligation, you know, to parent you and to help you grow up. And anyways, it's a cool thing.
Well, and I think from the kids' perspective too, something that I didn't realize for a long time, until I think we had a conversation about it, is that like you guys haven't done this before. And that's something the kid doesn't understand necessarily, but you are learning as you go because each kid is different too, like you just said. So each one's so unique and you guys are just learning how to understand that kid. And so we had a conversation about that and it opened my eyes in a different way to be like, wow, I need to have grace for that then. Like, and so
yeah,
it's something like Tyler or Caitlin, they're not going to realize for a while. But
yeah, and it's funny you say that because I've said that to them, like, you know, hey guys, you know, it's pretty much that same thing. Like, Mom and Dad, we're doing the best we can, you know, like, so it's very true. Like having those conversations, I think, so the kids can have some grace. And I think a lot of it is just talking about teamwork too, like sticking together. Like even, you know, an 11 in this world today, 11 years old is a tough age, you know, it just really is. Because they're kind of in between. They're really getting to that tween age of child or adult, you know, and so they're trying to find their ways. And so like kind of what you're alluding to a little bit there, Madison, is that just when you think you have it figured out, then it changes, you know, because they move into a different stage of life, you know, and you have this different dynamic on it. So I'll tell you right now, so like some things have been going on with Tyler and just, you know, different like behaviors and not outbursts of anger, but more like different kind of outbursts of sadness. Well, he's one, as I think this is worth getting into it for a second, right? So you guys have heard of the bucket, like each kid has a bucket, right? And if their bucket is designed to be filled with, you know, our time, our attention, our love, you know, it's their emotional bucket kind of. We all have one. It's not just a child, right? And different people have different love languages, right? And there's a book for that too. But I think what's happened, maybe this will help somebody. I think what's happened, you know, having Caitlin and then Kian come along, is that Tyler, who was used to having Mom and Dad all to himself and really, really intimately close with, you know, especially Mom and through his old, you know, nursing years and that kind of thing, which is why, by the way, that I always take them on a trip with just me when they turn 4. So they've nursed. They're so close to Mom, right? And, you know, Dad doesn't have the goods to produce any of that good stuff, right? So it's okay. You can laugh. You know, I'm a breastfeeding advocate too. Jill and I are big time. We feel like it's a great thing. So anyways, I always take them on a 4-year-old trip where it's just me. So I can kind of like do some of that bonding, you know, and like say, hey, you got a dad over here too, you know, and we can have a good time.
That's coming up for Kian. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's coming up, right? This year I've been talking to him, and at first it's a really little rabbit trail. At first he was like, I was like, where do you want to go for your 4-year-old trip, man? And he's like, the park, you know. Well, I'm talking about like an overnight trip where we get on a plane and we get out of here, you know. And so I done lost my train of thought now, started thinking about that. What was I talking about before that, you guys?
You're talking about the bonding time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was just so Tyler's bucket, long story short, we really feel like a lot of what we're seeing in him is really a result of his bucket, his mama bucket, especially being very, very empty. Because, see, we both work from home, we homeschool. So what happens when you homeschool is a lot of your day is filled with schooling, right? So it's not exactly just like fun bonding time, especially if they're pushing back. And I think you guys homeschooled, didn't you? Or not? No? Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot to it. And so anyways, I'm trying to kind of take you guys to a place here where so we've talked about like some behavioral things and just day-to-day parenting things, right? But there's this deeper level to it too, is that when you start seeing certain things in your kids that is not good for them, and like it hurts your heart, and it takes a while sometimes to figure it out, and to really pray about it, to be open and figure it out. And so what we've got to do now is we've got to figure out a way to plan some time, get his bucket filled up, that kind of thing. And we truly believe we'll see some of those behavioral issues go away because he's working from a deficit, and so actually Dr. Scott talks a lot about that relationship being a big driver of how well the parenting goes too, so we can never forget that their needs really don't change from when they're little. But what happens is that life gets so busy that they don't get the attention a lot of times. So another little tool that I learned was just using a special 10, we call it. This was actually from a different course, but a special 10 is where you go to each child and you say, hey, let's do a special 10. They get to choose whatever they want to do for 10 minutes with you. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but if anybody's a parent, and especially if you have multiple children, I think we can all attest, it's really weird sometimes, like 2 or 3 days can go by and you realize like, wow, I really haven't had any quality time with that child. You guys agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can do special 10s, special 20s, things like that. So that's another little tool that is, and the kids get used to it and they'll start coming up, say, hey, can I have a special 10, Dad, today? And that like melts your heart.
Nice. Yeah.
That's such a great way though for them to learn, like, I mean, confrontation in a healthy way though, and telling you what you need and telling like you what their emotions and their feeling and stuff too. Cause I know like until I got older and understand that I liked quality time and stuff, and that was my love language, then I could communicate that. But yeah, that's an incredible tip and like way that you're teaching your kids that.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, hey, so we're kind of running out of time. We're about to wrap up here. Will you conclude our session by Madison told me a story. Which one? So
Tyler came in. I asked the kids sometimes when I'm in that like middle ground, like, hey, how was everybody's weeks? And what do you guys do this week? And he had come in and he was like, well, I don't have any electronics because my dad's teaching me about balance. And I was like, I'm like, okay, well, but I was like, that's a great thing. And like walking these kids through like balance. And that's something my dad also does, and like a conversation that he's also had with my brother and me and everybody. So will you talk to us like and just conclude on why it's important to teach your kids balance? And yeah,
I think just helping them realize that there's always going to be things in our life that try to consume us, whether, from a passion standpoint or even, it can be work. And, and as believers, we would say that a lot of times those things can become our God if we're not careful, right? Anything can be a God, little g. And so, what I've also learned, it's funny he used the word balance, because really what I've learned, Madison, is that it's really counterbalance, right? And so because, you can still have balance, but sometimes like, let's say you're behind on schoolwork. Well, maybe you need to go do a lot of schoolwork for a while, but then you let that come back in, right? Or maybe it's the weekend and he's really killed it all week in school. And maybe because we use, we have iPhones, so we approve time on his iPad. Like I can do it an hour. My choices are only 15 minutes, an hour, or all day, right? But, or so maybe he's killed it at school all week and it's Saturday. Maybe I want to give him a little more time that week, right? And so I think his comment to you was kind of rooted in the fact that he definitely was out of balance in this, in what he had done, not getting school done, because the rule is you don't get on electronics until school's done. So yeah, it's just teaching them moderation and just because I think it's all about helping them realize that problem, whatever form it takes, is never going to go away in our life. Right. We always are going to have that challenges of where we're tempted to be out of balance in a way, or wrong counterbalance. So yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you for explaining that too, the counterbalance analogy. So
yeah. Well, again, we thank you for being part of this. We're going to have you on we're going to be doing a financial series later. So just at our when we release this episode, we'll have your information at the bottom. We'll reference the National Center of Biblical Parenting and a couple other things. But tell us about your business. So people are looking for what you do. Just kind of give us a real small snippet of what you do for your profession, so we can, if people are looking for that, they can find you.
Yeah, I've been in the financial industry for 25 years, and since 2008 have done comprehensive financial planning, bottom line. And so kind of my wheelhouse is pre-retirees, helping people transition from those working years where they built this nest egg to then how do they make that last during their whole retirement. Think about, healthcare, income, taxes, all that stuff, investments. So as a CFP, a certified financial planner, and that's just how I think, it's 360 degrees. So yeah, that's what I spend most of my time doing.
And you have a podcast you do on your own as you talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, so that podcast, I do it actually to help my friend out, or to do it with him to train advisors. It's actually a podcast called Advisor Gold. The missing allocation, because and if you think about all the inflation these days and things like that, so we advocate doing a kind of like a 10% allocation of the nest egg into physical gold and silver. And so my friend who runs the National Center, you got that in my mouth. It's National Gold Consultants.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do that with him, and it's a blast. And I've got some things in the works, possibly for some other shows on. We want to do one called, and if you're listening, you better not steal this name if you're wanting to do something too. But we're wanting to do one called Happy Aging Radio, something like that, as a podcast, and just talk about the process of aging, and the challenges that come with that and the solutions. So yeah.
Well, yeah, so awesome. As you can tell, Gary's very passionate about kids, and just on the other topic, and when we have it on the financial part, you'll see he's very passionate about helping people get their finances in order too. So
yeah, it's a tough time out there, all the inflation, low interest rates, all that stuff.
So we'll tag all that. So if you want to find Carrie or learn more about what we talked about today, that'll be in the bottom of our episode in the description. So thank you so much again, Carrie, for joining us and sharing your journey on parenting and all the references. So thank you to the viewers who stayed with us, and we always appreciate you guys tuning in and following us all the way to the end. And we trust that you guys have learned something. And again, if you have any questions, you could even reach out to Carrie, reach out to us. We're happy to address any questions that you might have. So
absolutely.
Until next time, we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks, Carrie.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Legacy Builders Podcast. Make sure to share this episode with your friends and family. And remember, today is a great day to start building your legacy.